First, what do you think her strategy is?
I think her strategy is rather obvious, and I know how frustrating it is to Senator Graham. He's the head of the Judiciary Committee. He's a former military judge. He's an accomplished lawyer himself. He's accustomed to these things happening in an orderly fashion. She's trying to coerce the Senate into changing its rules so that the House prosecutors that she will send over there can call witnesses who had not testified in the Judiciary or Intelligence Committee hearings.
Isn't that the job of the House? Should they not have done that if they wanted that evidence entered into this case?
If I were a Democrat in the House, I would be moving to reopen the impeachment on the basis of newly acquired evidence, which are these new emails of people getting instructions directly from the president to hold up on the sending of the funds. That would justify holding on to the articles of impeachment because there's new evidence and perhaps new articles. If I were a Republican in the Senate, I would go about my business as if there had been no articles of impeachment, because until those articles of impeachment come over to the Senate, there is nothing for the Senate to do.
So you're saying no harm, no foul if Senator McConnell does not receive this?
Correct. But I understand Senator Graham's frustration.
There's a reason that Republicans wanted this impeachment trial over and done with as soon as possible. And that's because they feared that more damning information about Trump would come out. And to the surprise of exactly no one, that's exactly what happened here, leading even Fox News' senior judicial analyst Judge Napolitano to call for the House to write new articles of impeachment against Trump. Napolitano is referring to newly revealed information that shows that the administration is withholding 20 emails between Robert Blair, an aide to Trump's chief of staff, and Michael Duffy, an official in the White House's Office of Management and Budget, regarding the $391 million in frozen aid to Ukraine at the center of Trump's impeachment. The White House is refusing to comply with the Freedom of Information Act lawsuit, prompting the New York Times to challenge the White House and ask a federal judge to expedite arguments in court. And if we've learned anything from this administration, it's that where there's smoke, there is a raging inferno filled with evidence of criminal activity and impeachable offenses. I'm pretty sure that's how the saying goes. And beyond the discovery of newly incriminating information, Republicans' latest sticking point is that they're making a big deal of changing the Senate rules so that the Senate would be able to call witnesses that didn't testify for the House, namely Mulvaney and Bolton and Duffy. But here's the thing, the Senate writes its own rules. They're only ironclad insofar as the Senate decides they are. And if they were truly interested in a fair trial, if they were truly interested in making sure they had all the facts, it would be a no-brainer to change those rules to allow witnesses to testify. Now, Bill Hemmer laments the fact that calling witnesses like Bolton to testify is something that Democrats should have done during the impeachment inquiry in the House. And I get that it's hard to keep our facts straight when every single day brings another scandal, but the reality is that Democrats tried to get Bolton to testify. The only reason that he didn't testify for the House was because he signaled that he'd bring it to the courts and let a lengthy court case play out before he'd show up. And the Democrats thought it would be more important to finish the impeachment inquiry than to wait for yet another instance of obstruction. In an impeachment predicated on obstruction, by the way, to slow them down. And let's be honest here, if Democrats did bring the issue of forcing Bolton to testify to the courts, the GOP and Fox News would have had a collective meltdown over delaying the process. They'd screech about how Democrats only want to drag this out, how this is unprecedented, how impeachment belongs in the Congress and not the courts. The outrage machine would have run on such high gear that steam would have been coming out of your televisions if they were set to Fox News. So Bill Hemmer and the members of the GOP who blame Democrats for not forcing the testimony of Bolton shouldn't pretend that it was in any way their own doing. Except now, Republicans may have encountered a major problem, considering Bolton has come out and signaled that he'd be willing to testify if the Senate was to subpoena him. He took to Twitter linking to a statement saying, "The House has concluded its constitutional responsibility by adopting articles of impeachment related to the Ukraine matter. It now falls to the Senate to fulfill its constitutional obligation to try impeachments, and it does not appear possible that a final judicial resolution of the still answered constitutional questions can be obtained before the Senate acts. Accordingly, since my testimony is once again at issue, I have had to resolve the serious competing issues as best I could. Based on careful consideration and study, I have concluded that if the Senate issues a subpoena for my testimony, I am prepared to testify." But here's the thing, in a prescient move, Speaker Pelosi didn't transmit the articles of impeachment to the Senate, using them as leverage to get assurances of a fair trial. And Bolton might have inadvertently given her a gift, because this gives the House the opportunity to issue a subpoena to John Bolton to testify. Because if he was willing to testify to the Senate, there should be no reason why he wouldn't be willing to testify to the House. If the point is to reveal information, to reveal the truth, then it shouldn't matter what chamber he'd be testifying in. What matters is that we hear from him. The point is, we can't trust McConnell to ever do the right thing. So if it's between hoping that McConnell calls Bolton to testify in the Senate and guaranteeing that he testifies in the House, I would take the latter 10 times out of 10.